Hello, my dear friends, here on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 10th of October of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians carried out the most powerful attack on the Ukraine energy facilities and energy infrastructure. We have this picture where we can see where exactly the Russians were attacking different power plants and substations, and this was not the biggest attack when talking about number of drones and missiles that were involved during this attack. We're talking about the most powerful attack when talking about the number of energy facilities and critical infrastructure objects were damaged and destroyed by Russia. During the previous night, lots of videos were published by Ukrainians, and most of them just about one thing: how Russians attacked and destroyed another energy facility, and then we can see a total or complete blackout in this or that territory of Ukraine. So Ukraine suffered huge losses. We see that Ukraine doesn't have any air defense at all, or maybe they have air defense, but this air defense can't do anything with this. And the most important is that this is not the last attack carried out by Russia. Today, according to information we have, the Russians began preparation for the next massive missile and drone attack. At least 3 Russian Su-95 strategic bombers are redeploying from Ukrainka Air Base in Amur Oblast to Engels Aleni Air Base in Saratov Murmansk Oblast. The final preparations for the next large-scale missile attack on Ukraine have almost been completed, with the attack likely to take place in the next 36 hours. So we see that the Russians will continue at their attacks just with one purpose: to force Zelensky to capitulate. I'm not sure whether Zelensky is going to accept this, but obviously, maybe even if he is not going to accept, obviously we understand that the population of Ukraine will not be able to live with these conditions. Either they would begin immigration and they will abandon the territory of Ukraine at all, or they will force Zelensky to do this. Furthermore, according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked different military objects, mainly in the northeastern part of Ukraine. Here we can see how Russians discovered another temporary deployment point of the armored forces of Ukraine, and then this temporary deployment point was damaged and destroyed by Iran drones and by missiles. Here we can see another temporary deployment point of the armored forces of Ukraine discovered in the northeastern part. We can see most likely drone operators, and Russians, when discovered this position, they destroyed this territory immediately with Iskander missiles, and then we can see several episodes with secondary detonation. Almost the same story took place in the eastern part of Ukraine, in the Kharkiv Oblast. Here we can see the same story. The Russians first discovered temporary deployment point of the armored forces of Ukraine, and then they attacked this theater with Iskander missiles, and lots of explosions, as you can see, were recorded. The entire military camp was destroyed. So no air defense system from Ukraine, and it seems that Ukrainians and Zelensky himself has less and less chances to turn this war in his favor. Furthermore, the president of the Russian Federation, after this massive missile and drone attack, made lots of very interesting statements. It seems that he's like playing with Zelensky. Trump is really doing a lot to resolve complex, prolonged crises and sincerely strives to end the conflict in Ukraine. Here and are other statements made by Putin, by the Russian president, on the Ukraine issue during a press conference in Dushanbe. Russia and the United States have an understanding of the direction to move in to end the conflict in Ukraine peacefully. We remain based on the discussions that took place in Anchorage. We haven't fully disclosed what was discussed in Anchorage. Maybe we can still achieve a lot. So when talking about Putin, about Trump's peacekeeping efforts, Russia's fate is always in the hands of its people. Our response to Tomahawks is strengthening the Russian Federation air defense system. Another important statement made by Putin is that, according to information we have, Putin announced the acquisition of new weapons by Russia. So it seems that in coming days, the Russian Federation will use their new weapon, most likely to attack the territory of Ukraine, and this might be something much more powerful than the Oreshnik system that we saw in the past during the special military operation. So let's wait and see. One thing is clear, that in coming days the Russians will launch another massive missile and drone attack. The question is whether the Russians are going to attack the western part of Ukraine, or the Russians will attack once again the eastern part of Ukraine, with the purpose to double effect they managed to reach today. So, and this is very important. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but now let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 24 hours, lots of very important changes on the ground were recorded. And first, let's talk about the Zaporozhye direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. Now we have no doubts that currently the main clashes are taking place for the Poltavka fortified area. The Russians, as you can see according to this map, managed to improve their position significantly. This is the situation by the end of the 9th of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the end of the 10th of October. The Russians improved their positions and they captured every single square kilometer to the east of the river of Yanchul. This video was published by Ukrainian resources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians on the eastern bank of the river of Yanchul. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that these farms were captured by Russia. Furthermore, we know for sure that the Russians captured the eastern part of the settlement as well. And today, pro-Ukrainian resources also published their vision of the situation. And as you can see, according to this map, the territory of the city of Poltavka is currently cut into three pieces. The eastern part is under complete Russian control, the northwestern part is under control of the armed forces of Ukraine, and the central part is already covered as a gray zone, which means that most likely in coming days the settlement of Poltavka, at least its central and the southern parts, are going to be captured by Russia, and as we can see, without any resistance from the Ukrainian side, or at least the resistance the Ukrainians are showing today is not enough to stabilize the situation and to slow down the Russians. At the same time, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the northwestern direction towards the settlement of Pokrovska. We have already discussed this video that was published today by pro-Ukraine resources, and here we can see how Ukrainians were trying to counterattack the southern part of the settlement of Alexeyevka with the purpose to force the Russians to fall back from these barracks and from these farms. As of now, we don't know for sure whether the Ukrainians managed to do this or not, but this is not the most important. This thing just confirms that the Russians managed to enter the southern part, and based on this video, most of the mappers adjusted this part of the settlement under complete Russian control. The most important probably is the videos that we got from the northwestern direction. As you can see, we have three icons in this area, and if you remember, during the previous days we were talking a lot that this village of Alexeyevka is very important, because if Russia is able to establish complete control over this territory, then most likely from these positions the Russians would be able to establish complete FPV drone control over the village by the name of Volcha, and it seems that the Russians managed to do this. For example, in this video we can see how Ukrainians from the area of the river of Volcha, from the settlement of Kalimitsy, were trying to counterattack, or were trying to bring vehicle to the line of combat contact with the purpose to evacuate soldiers, but this vehicle was damaged and destroyed just 1 or 2 kilometers from the river of Volcha. Here we can see the same episode. The Russians, as you can see, were attacking different equipment and positions of the armed forces of Ukraine along the river of Volcha, just a few hundred meters to the south from the river itself. So complete control over the territory without any chances for Ukrainians to go through this territory with the purpose to counterattack Russian positions. A bit further in the northwestern direction we can see another vehicle of the armed forces of Ukraine. Probably this is an artillery system that was discovered by Russia and then attacked and destroyed by a Russian Lancet drone. So no chances for Ukrainians to carry out counter-offensive operation in this direction, which means that the northern flank of the Zaporozhye direction is completely secured by Russia. And now Russians have no problems to continue their offensive operation in the direction of Uspenovka and Poltavka. And this is exactly what the Russians are trying to do right now. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk direction. The situation for Ukrainians in this area is worsening, and the most important updates are coming from the settlement by the name of Vladimirovka. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly. This is the situation by the end of the 9th of October of 2025, and this is the situation by the end of the 10th of October. As you can see, the Russians managed to restore control over some positions to the south of Vladimirovka, and the Russians were recaptured the southern part of the settlement. Furthermore, several pro-Ukrainian, neutral, and pro-Russian resources confirmed that as a result of counter-offensive operation, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to restore complete control over the settlement of Vladimirovka. The Ukrainians were forced to fall back to the north, and they were forced to start concentrating themselves in the central part of the village of Shakhove. This is the key village in this direction. If Ukrainians lose control over the settlement of Shakhove, most likely Ukrainians would lose control over the entire Shakhove pocket. And the most important piece of news is that the Russians are using not just sabotage and reconnaissance group in this direction, not just infantry. The Russians began using vehicles, armored vehicles and tanks. So this is the article that was published by the pro-Ukraine resources. The Russian armored forces continued their mechanized attacks on Volodymyrovka yesterday and managed to land a large contingent. Unfortunately, the assault on Volodymyrovka continued yesterday. According to updated data, at about 12 o'clock, there were not 4 but at least 7 armored personnel carriers. At about 15:03 p.m., another attack took place again by 7 armored personnel carriers, and after 5 p.m., the Russian armored forces sent 2 tanks towards the village. So thus, at least 16 armored personnel carriers and 6 motorcycles were involved in the assault operation. So the Ukrainians are saying that just during this attack, the Russians managed to land infantry from 50 till 75 soldiers, and this is a very big number. The Russians, during the previous stage of the special military operation in 2025, when they stopped using mechanized vehicles were forced to use just infantry, and sometimes another group of soldiers before let's say taking positions or before getting to the line of combat contact were forced to cross up to 5 or 10 kilometers. And usually when the Russians got the line of combat contact, they were very exhausted because they were forced to cross so many kilometers. And now the Russians began using vehicles, and now they have possibilities to bring fresh forces to the line of combat contact, to do this very fast, and these forces are not exhausted and they can continue offensive operation. So for some reason the Russians are returning back to the tactics of use of vehicles. The Ukrainians, we see, are not ready for this. They just got used to new tactics when Russians were using just troopers and that's it. And now the Ukrainians now need to think everything from the beginning. They need to rethink everything. They need to change their tactics. But the problem is that Ukrainians and Syrsky himself doesn't have enough of time for this. They don't have time for regrouping and for rethinking of the situation. Furthermore, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the direction of the roads Safiyevka, Novopavlovka. During the previous 24 hours, lots of attacks were recorded here. Here we can see how Ukrainians tried to bring additional vehicles in this direction, but when the vehicles were discovered, they were immediately destroyed by Russia. And we have changes on the ground according to neutral mappers. We believe that the Shakhove pocket would be taken by Russia within the next 2 or 3 weeks, and everything along this red line would be captured by Russia. And if this happens, the Russians from these positions have possibilities to attack in many directions, especially the most interesting direction is possible offensive in the direction of Drushkovka, because if Russians are able to continue offensive operation in this direction and to answer the settlement of Drushkovka itself, which is much smaller than the city of Konstantinovka or the city of Pokrovsk, then from these positions the Russians would be able even to encircle the Ukrainians in the area of the city of Konstantinovka, and this can lead to complete collapse of the entire Donbas arc defense operation from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the city of Konstantinovka. Most likely the Russians understand that they will attack the city of Drushkovka and they will attack the city of Konstantinovka from behind. So that is why the Russians are not in a hurry in this area. The Russians are bombing and attacking positions of the armed forces of Ukraine in its southern parts, southwestern parts, trying to destroy for as many as possible Ukrainian positions in this part of the city. This is, by the way, the Konstantinovka citadel, the most fortified area, and the Russians have already begun destroying this territory and reducing this territory to ruins. So as of now, we don't expect any activities from the Russian side. As of now, they have a lot of job to do. They're focused on the line between Plishchevka, Ivanopoly, and Konstantinovka itself. During the previous 24 hours, we received lots of videos from this area. There are lots of Ukrainians, lots of buildings, as you can see. So the Russians are moving back very slowly. The Ukrainians have fortified this area during the previous months. So this is not going to be a very easy trip for Russians, but despite this situation, the Russians continue offensive. Now let's talk about the Sivers-Liman direction. We see that the Russians slowed down their offensive. During the previous weeks, they managed to improve their position significantly on the territory around the city of Siversk and around the village of Yampol. Now the Russians are not moving. We haven't received anything from this area for a very long period of time. Today we got reports that the Russians improved their positions on the territory of the village of Yampol. This information was confirmed by this video that was published by Ukrainians. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians in different parts of the area, and one of the episodes was geolocated exactly in this point. Ukrainians are losing the ground in the area of Yampol. They are trying to stabilize the situation, but Ukrainians continue sending more and more troopers in this direction, but everything that enters the area around the settlement of Yampol is being destroyed by Russia immediately. So the logistics is under complete control in this square between Liman, Yampol, Dronovka and Siversk, without any chances for Ukrainians to restore. But Ukrainians at the same time are not falling back. They're trying to hold their positions. They're trying just to win some time. Telling the truth, very difficult to understand what exactly the Ukrainians are waiting for and for what purposes they're trying to win some time. Probably they understand that the defense of the city of Slaviansk is not ready yet. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Kupiansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians continue attacking the main logistic and supply lines in this area, trying not to allow the Ukrainians to redeploy their forces from the eastern bank of the river Oskol to the western bank. So the roads and river crossings are under complete Russian control. This is another example when Ukrainians were trying to bring their forces from one bank to another, but when the Ukrainians discovered the Russian drone, they began running away from this area. At the same time, another vehicle was moving in the direction of the river Oskol, and this vehicle was destroyed. So no chances to cross the river Oskol for Ukrainians. It seems that there are, let's say, possibilities to enter the eastern bank of the river Oskol, but there are no chances to escape this pauldron, this pocket. So it seems that this is already an operational encirclement for Ukrainians. As for the northern direction, according to information we have, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians once again managed to improve their position significantly in the western part of the city of Volchansk. So it seems that the Russians are about to finish the battle for this territory, or at least for the western part. If Russians can capture the western part of the city of Volchansk completely, Ukrainians will lose any possibilities to supply their contingent in this area, and sooner or later the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back from this territory as well. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. Once again, the Russians are about to finish their preparation before another massive missile and drone attack, and Putin promised to show us the new Russian weapon. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes on my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.